All right, all right, Mr. Chair. If you want to go ahead and get started. Uh, we scheduled just to become an informal conversation tonight. We have received correspondence and also had some verbal conversations with some other commissioners about the desire for more frequent work sessions on some various topics. So what we wanted to do tonight was maybe talk through that with you, figure out some prioritization of what those topics would be, come up with a list of potential topics that doesn't need to be all exhaustive, but just some potential ideas, kind of maybe flesh out a little bit the intent behind the work sessions, see where we need to go with these. So that's why we're here. Again, just want to be pretty informal. We can kind of talk through this, throw out ideas. We have a kind of a working list, and I think there are things that are on most people's minds already. So I'll run through some of those real quickly, and then we can expand on those, discuss those a little bit more. The first one is some training on design standards and guidelines. We have some potential resources that Richard will speak to a little bit more through the National Association of Preservation Councils. There is some cost associated with that, but it's something we're definitely looking into in terms of like education in a broad sense about historic kind of best practices and guidelines. What we can do though is specific to the Boise design guidelines. Maybe we can brainstorm tonight some areas that we may need to focus on, but Richard and myself could work through some topics related specifically to Boise's guidelines. If there were some areas that maybe seem a little shaky or a little gray, I think part of that conversation can be areas for improvement, frankly, because we know those exist. So maybe we'll start there. Are there some specific items, tricky spots, things you guys get tripped up on in our current guidelines?
I would say that, generally, one of the things that stands out to me most in some of the projects that we review is, this is pretty nitpicky, but design can be nitpicky, but the God is in the details, so to speak, is window patterning, window size and patterning can sometimes make a project feel not of a district. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It starts to feel more suburban or something like that. Whereas, there is kind of a very formal form and order and pattern to window and door openings in a project that make it feel still of today, but of historic.
And you're thinking in terms of like proportion, rhythm,
Correct.
Spacing, not necessarily patterning could speak to the placement of windows, or it could speak specifically to the window patterns themselves.
Yeah, no, I don't mean like Muntins necessarily, but I mean that's obviously part of it too.
Sure,
but I'm speaking more to what I see more of an issue is the general, like, really high narrow windows that you might put up above a big sunken tub or something like that.
Yeah.
It just feels out of place, especially when it's more visible versus less visible from a public right of way. That sort of thing. So just kind of understanding the the formal nature of historic architecture and how those sorts of things inform the look and feel of a building.
Yeah, off top of my head, I can't recall what level of detail the guidelines get into in relationship to that, but we can pull that up, pull that and kind of expand on it.
And the guidelines our guidelines are quite pretty general.
And
to that end, perhaps another topic is looking at our guidelines in general. But
sure. Yeah. As I already mentioned, we certainly know that there are some areas that need improvement. We've heard that on a number of fronts, right? Related to even from a 30,000 foot level, like the organization of the guidelines and the way that things are phrased and the way that they're structured. We know that there could be some potentially better approaches there in terms of, and we've heard this from city leadership as well, the term generally appropriate and generally not appropriate. Certainly where a lot of our friction comes from, I think is fair to say, some more guidance at a minimum, more guidance on what that means, and a more extreme version of what a guideline revision looks like is maybe getting rid of that language and moving to a different model. So if we have heard that consistently, and we do know that it's a problem.
The one thing that I see us agreeing to a lot is the ADUs and the height issue with ADUs.
Mhm.
And so I think it'd be good to understand like what we're comfortable with or what the guidelines are allowing us to do there.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay.
And
Yep.
like the pitch of the roof, because I don't understand the pitch of the roof as well as other people do in this room. That would be
Okay.
helpful for
Okay.
me.
Yeah. Definitely.
I think something worth exploring too is sustainability. As the city moves further, we're gonna see more projects that want to do solar roofs and things like that. So how they mesh with the guidelines, plus the National Park Service just issued the sustainability guidelines. So I mean, that's part of revising the overall guidelines, but maybe how we can integrate some of that now.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe you guys know, but I don't, one thing that's always kind of come up, and that's what I brought up in my email, was the notion of the survey and what that means, and to update the survey and what that
Sure.
means. Because I hear it brought up, but I don't quite understand the context of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of, it's like an inventory essentially, correct?
Yeah, right. And you are correct. It is often brought up. So the surveys are what were used to establish the districts. And depending on the district, they're anywhere from the early 2000s to I don't know what the latest ones would be.
That's kind of the latest.
Okay. So more like early 90s to early 2000s is kind of the range of when these things happen. So when the districts were proposed for creation, they created the surveys that determine the level of contributing structures within the district, and it's kind of the basis for the creation of the district. I think there's been, I don't think there's been, I know there's been a lot of concern from both this body and the public in general that there are some inaccuracies, some errors, some omissions in those surveys. The methodology is perhaps outdated, and there are some best practices that could be implemented in a new set of surveys. We have been talking about new surveys for a while. The challenge is largely funding. It's a rather expensive endeavor when we have 3,000 plus historic properties in our districts. So it's finding funding, it's prioritizing it above other things. Right now, our approach is to first update the preservation plan, which is sorely outdated. We have CLG funds to do that. So we are undertaking that grant administration process to get the preservation plan updated. The thought being that I think it would be a little out of order to jump in and start throwing money at new surveys without knowing that the direction of historic preservation in Boise as guided by the preservation plan. That's really the foundation and the basis for all of our work. So as that preservation plan forms and we understand needs for further preservation in Boise, shifts since the districts were created in terms of the preservation landscape, we can better strategize on how to spend funds on new surveys and identify areas that need it the most. So that's really what we're focusing on right now. That effort is currently underway. We were just awarded the funds, so we'll go through the procurement of a consultant process and start working that through the proper channels to get that preservation plan updated. It's going to take a bit. Obviously, these things take some time. There will be a public outreach component to it, certainly, and then the work that it takes to update the plan. So it'll take some time and some work to be done, but we feel like that is the foundation for new survey work and needs to come first. Yeah, think of the preservation plan, and I don't know how I'm very familiar with it because this is what I do, but most people probably aren't. The city has a comprehensive plan called Blueprint Boise, so you can think of the way that comprehensive plan relates to the zoning code, the same way that the preservation plan relates to the guidelines and any historic preservation ordinances. It's really the guiding overarching document that kind of creates the path. And then specific guidelines and ordinances related to historic preservation would help to enact that plan and enact that vision. So when we talk about that preservation plan, that's really like a very much overarching document that guides everything we do. And that's why we think it's important to do first.
Could we get a regular update on where you're at with the preservation plan? Just like over time as you
Oh,
make-
absolutely.
as like
Yeah.
things get
Yep.
updated, if you
Yep,
could
most
update
definitely.
us in the work session, that'd be really
Yeah,
helpful.
I think things were delayed at the state a little bit in terms of distributing the money. So that just happened. So we will and we can I don't know if there will be monthly updates needed, but maybe like every other month or so. Or as significant milestones in the project happen, we can certainly provide those updates at a work session like this. Yeah, definitely.
And there may be opportunities for commissioner involvement and being part of the process. You know, everybody, every member of the public, staff, and the commission are all going to be part of the development of the new the new historic preservation plan, which, as he mentioned, is sorely needed. It's almost as old as me, and that's old. It was like the enabling historic preservation plan, and we're beyond enabling the historic preservation procedures. We need to advance and see what the future holds and have a document that prepares us for it.
And I think we've already kind of touched on the second bullet point here, but that would be updating the design guidelines. I think that is hand in hand with discussing the current guidelines. I think as that conversation takes place, it starts to inform what needs to change. So those two are very closely related. And I think would be pretty high on our priority list, frankly. And maybe that's something we can talk about here before we finish is what is the prioritization of these tasks. I think probably training on current guidelines and standards is pretty high, if not the highest. Another item is the CLG grant. And again, we've kind of already discussed that, where we're at with updates to the preservation plan. And as we start to formulate what that means for new surveys, where we're at with that. So some more consistent updates in relation to that, certainly heard loud and clear. Awards and nominations. I would love to kind of talk through this one a little bit more. I've been involved in the historic preservation program with Boise since 2018. And in that amount of time, we have not conducted any awards, I don't believe. There is the Design Excellence Awards that sometimes capture historic properties. So the mayor has some Design Excellence Awards. And a couple of those have been historic properties. There was the converted church in the North End that won a design award a while back. So I don't know if the thought here is something like that for historic preservation or yeah, I'd love to kind of talk through this one a little bit more.
Maybe I brought that one up. So I think, I don't know, like you said, you've been here forever. The Historic Preservation Commission used to give out awards. And I remember seeing like plaques in like the North End and downtown. So just reintroducing that
Yeah.
potentially, as if we see a good project, good rehabilitation project to award them. I feel like we do a lot of wrist slapping and
Sure.
a lot of like things that people don't like us for. So like doing something positive
Yeah.
in turn.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. No, that makes a ton of sense. I can, before I led this team, when I was in design review, I didn't have real good visibility on what went on in historic preservation. So prior to like 2018, there probably were awards. I'm just not aware of them. So we can do a little bit of research and then maybe come up with a proposal for what that would look like. For the Design Excellence Awards, there are different categories like adaptive reuse is one, excellence in design. So there could be like this kind of like spectrum of awards that would recognize good work because I think you're right. We'd need to bring some positivity to the conversation for sure. So yeah, could recognize people doing good things in different areas of work would be great.
I would say like it doesn't have to be maybe necessarily even in our designated historic districts. It could be
Yeah,
outside.
Could be
as well.
outside. Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
Can I chime in?
Yeah.
I know a lot of cities that I've been involved with happen to have a local historic preservation advocacy organization. That doesn't really exist here in Boise. There's Preservation Idaho. They could possibly be a partner in establishing something like that. And when I've seen these kinds of awards, it's usually been tied to a state annual historic preservation conference, and the awards are presented there. And I don't know if the city would have capacity to set one of those up, or and what venue and in what capacity we would offer these awards, but there just could be a potential not only for us to associate with other, mostly Preservation Idaho. And if any of you know a lot of people that want to establish a local historic preservation advocacy organization, get her done. Let's get her done.
And then the last one I have on my list is understanding CLG status, certified local government, and what that means. I do know that the state coordinator for CLGs recently left the state, so that one may be lower on the priority list just in terms of staffing for SHPO. They probably I'm gonna assume you need some help before we jump too hard into that one. But
Oh,
just
you could jump now. It's fine.
Okay,
We have somebody
alright.
starting in October, so, and Dan knows his. So.
we don't want to overwhelm Dan. So yeah, maybe that one's lower on the priority list. But yeah, some education maybe about CLG status, what that means, the advantages, and all of that. I mean, certainly we know that the grant program is available. There are certainly other benefits, and we can flush that out a little bit and communicate that to you as well. So with that, I would be open to other thoughts, thoughts on prioritization of these items. Again, other ideas for some maybe educational topics, other ideas for work sessions that y'all may have.
So one of the things I think I mentioned also was like the landmarking program. So like
Okay.
how does the landmarking program work? How can somebody designate a landmark? What's our role in the designation process?
Okay.
If we want to bring up a landmark, I think that was one of them.
Okay, and does it, I mean, does it make sense that we prioritize that discussion and training on the current guidelines? It seems to be the most pressing topic, certainly in terms of like day-to-day work of the commission. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Richard, do you want to speak to
Oh,
the
well, yeah,
NAPC piece at all?
Especially as that can help us, as you know, and this is a question that I'll get with Dan at the SHPO to find out more about it. But there is talk, and I'm pretty sure it's going to happen, that the hope is all historic preservation commissions in the entire state will become members of the National Association of Preservation Commissions. And that organization has trainings, online trainings. It's called CAMP, C-A-M-P, CAMP program for, the acronym has escaped me, but whatever that stands for. And one of their topics that is a pre-programmed online course basically is on the standards and guidelines for design review. And it'll be more generic as far as the standards go, but most standards throughout the state or throughout all the states are similar but different. So there'd be a lot gained from that. And also that camp or that particular course is about, using the Secretary of the Interior standards as part of the, giving you a deeper understanding of how the federal standards and local design guidelines work together and piggyback off of each other. And that's, we're getting back into financial resources because those courses aren't free, but I am going to get in touch with the SHPO and make some inquiries about that and how we can offer that as a potential ready-made, prepackaged training that we all can participate in. And I'll get in touch and find out about further particulars and some questions and comments and ideas that I have about offering that as a training ready-made. And then we can add to that and add specifics to, shorter trainings we can add to the further particular details of our specific guidelines.
I would love some clarity on the materials that we allow and we don't allow
Mhm.
for windows and then also siding.
Mhm.
But I think I know generally what we allow and what we don't, but not
Mhm.
really the reasoning behind some of that. So that would be very helpful. So when they come before us in unique situations, like we have one later today, we would be able to have some of our own background to fall back on
Oh, sure.
for those materials. That'd
Yeah.
be really helpful.
Mhm.
And then if you wouldn't mind, I know the design guidelines have a list, not exact, it's not written in list form, but it's like different styles that are very common, like Tudor,
Right.
Queen Anne, Victorian, like there's all those pretty common styles that we
Yeah.
see, not so much vernacular, but the other ones.
Right.
If we could maybe go over some examples with you of what different features
Oh,
those
sure.
have.
Oh.
And then when we see the surveys come up, I think it might help inform us a little bit further, like this is what a Queen Anne looks like. This
Yeah.
is a feature that we usually see on Queen Anne's, that sort of thing.
That's great. And I have a copy of McAllister's Bible on
Okay.
historic architecture. So
That'd be perfect.
it's a Kindle version, but I can always find a way to steal those images. Maybe. I don't know if Amazon really wants me to do that,
Okay.
but I can definitely, and well, a couple staff people have, my colleague has
Mhm.
the paper version. So we can definitely get that together. And so here's Queen Anne, here's the features, pop up their illustrations.
Mhm.
There you go. You know what? And then, like you say, the things we don't encounter quite as often, like some of the revival styles and the teens to the 30s that are there beyond Tudor revival. And just so you know, what is the difference between mission and whatever, Spanish colonial revival,
Mhm.
et cetera.
That would be great. Yeah, I think that would help inform us a little bit further that when we see those features on something that's called that, we know that that's really integral to it and we don't want to override that or change it.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's enough to keep Richard busy for a while. So,
I have nothing else to say.
so yeah, that all sounds good. And of course, reach out to us with other ideas, comments. And as we start to move through this work session schedule, we can adjust as necessary. So yeah, thank you. Appreciate the feedback. I think it's really good. So maybe just run through the agenda real quick for tonight, and then we'll give you guys a few minutes to kind of hang out and finish your food before we get started. So, a little bit lighter agenda than we've seen recently tonight. So, 4 items. The first item on Crawl Street for the construction of 3 new single-family homes. We will hear that item. Item number 2 is on 1319 North 23rd Street, certificate of appropriateness to alter the character of finding facade. We will hear that one as well. Item number 3, 1304 North 26th Street is also a certificate of appropriateness to alter the character defining facade of a contributing structure. We would recommend that one for the consent agenda if the commission doesn't have any concerns. And the final item, number 4, 1316 West Hayes, certificate of appropriateness to construct a new detached garage and accessory dwelling unit. We would also recommend that one for the consent agenda without objection. Any questions, comments on that? If not, we'll take a break and see you at 6. Okay, perfect. All right, Mr. Chair, it's 6 o'clock. We can go ahead and get started. Good evening and welcome to the Boise City Historic Preservation Commission public hearing. A few things to start out with for tonight's proceedings. Everyone from the public entering the hearing virtually has been automatically muted and cannot speak. As the item you're interested in comes up for discussion, you will be called upon and unmuted. There's a chat function in Zoom. This is not part of the record and should only be used if technical difficulties arise. Our procedures for public hearings begin with a presentation from the planning team. Then we'll go to the applicant and then the representative of the Registered Neighborhood Association, followed by questions from the commission. After that, we proceed to public testimony, starting with those who are in person, then who signed up on the sign-up sheet in advance, and then anyone else who raises their hand, either in person or virtually. If you are attending through your telephone, you can type *9 to raise your hand. Each member of the public is allowed up to 3 minutes for testimony. We are strict with this time as it is limited in code. Finally, the applicant is allowed 5 minutes for rebuttal, after which the hearing will be closed and the commission will deliberate and render a decision. Mr. Chair, you have the floor.
Thank you, Josh. We are citizen volunteers appointed by the mayor and approved by the city council. Any decision made tonight may be appealed to the city council, provided that the appeal is filed within 10 days of this hearing. In order to file an appeal, you must have given written or oral testimony at tonight's meeting. So that's why it's important to give your name and address when you testify tonight. We utilize a consent agenda. That means that if the applicant agrees with the staff report and if there is no public opposition, the item will be placed on the consent agenda. All items that are placed on the consent agenda are approved with one motion without further public comment. For items not on the consent agenda, we will hold a full public hearing in the order just detailed a few minutes ago with staff, applicant, neighborhood association, and then the public testimony. Thank you all for attending tonight. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Maroney,
Here.
Montoto, Malloy,
Here.
Otter,
Here.
Parks,
Here.
Owens,
Here.
Sales,
Here.
Moore,
Here.
7 present, 1 absent.
Thank you. First up tonight is minutes acceptance. We have received minutes of the July 29th meeting and work session. Are there any comments or corrections to those minutes? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to approve.
Check. I'll make a motion. I motion to approve the Historic Preservation Commission meeting minutes and work session minutes from July 29th, 2024.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Maroney,
Abstain?
Malloy,
Aye.
Otter,
Abstain.
Parks.
Aye.
Owens,
Aye.
Sales,
Aye.
Moore,
Abstain.
3 abstain, 4 in favor. Motion carries.
Thank you. Next up, creation of a consent agenda. We have 2 items that have been recommended for the consent agenda this evening. The first item for consideration on the consent agenda is item number 3, DRH 24-00244 at 1304 North 26th Street. Is the applicant present? Great, thank you. Are you in agreement with the terms and conditions listed in the staff report? Thank you. They have answered in the affirmative. Is there anyone present to testify in opposition to this case? No one online, no one here in the room. Great. The second item for the consideration on the consent agenda is item number 4, DRH 24-00278 at 1316 West Hayes Street. Is the applicant for this one present? Great, thank you. Are you in agreement with the terms and conditions of the staff report? Great, thank you. Is there anyone here to testify in opposition to this application? Hearing none. Sounds like we have 2 potential cases for our consent agenda. I would entertain a motion to create and approve that agenda.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move to move DRH 24-0024 and DRH 24-00278 to our consent agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner Otter. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Maroney,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Otter,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Owens,
Aye.
Sales,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
all in favor. Motion carries.
Great, thank you. So if you're here for one of those 2 cases, you're welcome to stick around and listen to the rest of the public meeting, but otherwise you're free to go. Thank you.
No problem.
All right, moving into our new business. Item number 1, DRH 24-00202 at 616 East Crawl Street. Richard.
Okay, yep. This is the aerial map indicating where the property is located on the north side of Carl Street between Avenue E and Avenue F. This is a site plan showing 3 new residences and attached garages, as well as the lot coverage calculations. The lot coverage does exceed the guidelines 35%. However, the adjacent similar residences to the west, which we will be looking at later, also have greater lot coverages. And this is in a R2 zone, which is typically more compact with larger or excessive lot coverages. Here is a landscape plan showing the retention of the street trees and noting that there will be no landscape changes to the easternmost lot where the historic cottage remains. Here are the floor plans for all 3 of the residences. This is the elevations of Unit 1, Unit 2, and Unit 3. And here are the elevations of the garage. Here are the photographs of the residences immediately to the west that were previously mentioned, showing that their lot coverages are 40%, which is above the recommended 35%. And these are photographs of the opposite side of Carl Street to give a context of where this property is. Adjacent and nearby residences are a combination of 1-story residences as well as very similar 2-story recently constructed residences immediately to the west of this site. The heights to the roof peaks for all 3 residences are 23 feet 9 inches, and the width will keep it within the side yard setbacks as required by code. Therefore, this residence will be similar in height and width to buildings on the adjacent sites and the blocks. The mass and form are compatible to residences in the vicinity and features a front porch. Materials and window openings and types are all appropriate. These residences are to be built low to the ground, as can be seen from the elevation, but other residences in the area, including the more recently constructed ones, were also low to the ground. So staff feels that this is acceptable in this instance, given the context. The application proposes to construct a garage building that will have 3 separate garages. The garage will be substantially smaller in scale than the primary residence, with a height to the roof peak of only 14 feet 2 inches. The form and materials are similar to the primary residences as far as the garage goes. Each lot's proposed garage is below 500 square feet and 22 feet in height, and therefore they comply with the full setback requirements of the zone by providing the 22-foot backup space, utilizing the alley. And based on the above analysis, staff recommends approval, and I will stand for any questions from the commission.
Thank you, Richard. Are there questions for staff from the commission? I want to make sure we give time for Jill. She's remote this evening, but. Great. All right, is the applicant present? Good evening. Please be sure to state your name and address.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Ben Semple with Rodney Evans and Partners, 1450 West Bannock Street, Boise 83702. I don't have a whole lot to add to Richard's presentation. One thing I did want to mention is that we have worked out the sidewalk location. That was a condition of approval in there. There was some concern about location and street width. We've worked that out with ACHD and have no concerns. So we will be building a sidewalk that will retain the large mature trees along the frontage. It's about a 13-foot wide planter strip, and then we'll have a 5-foot sidewalk along the frontage of the project. We did some tree reclamation on the project as well. There was 2 almost 100-foot ponderosa pines that were removed off the alley. They were reclaimed by Les Bois Milling here in town. So they'll be repurposed for woodworking projects. So it wasn't just cut down and chipped up and sent to the dump. So pretty happy with that. Have a bunch of pictures of that too that I'm going to submit to the city for mitigation of those trees to be removed. I'd stand for any additional questions if you have any.
Great, thank you. Any questions for the applicant from the commission?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner. I did notice in your topographical survey, your footnote 5, that there's a grave headstone on the property. And you stated in there that more investigation may be needed. And question for you and for the staff as appropriate, what, if anything, has been found, and what is the investigation and remediation plan?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Moore, yeah, dug into that, went to the Idaho Historical Museum. There's no name that was on the stone. It was actually a real thin piece of marble that the surveyor had just noted as a headstone. It had a couple dates on it, but it was not like a headstone you'd see in a graveyard. To me, it looked more like a piece of a plaque or something that somebody had retained because it was like 4 years and didn't have a name that I could find in any record of anything in the city of Boise or even around Boise, outside of Boise. I looked in different census data and stuff to try to find that name, and there's not anything there. They dug around where it was. There's not anything there. So yeah, not a headstone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions for the applicant? Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone representing the neighborhood association? Okay, just as a point of note, the staff report, I think, indicates this is in the North End Historic District, an item number, section number 2, but it is East End, right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, is there anyone wishing to speak in, I don't have the sign-up sheets. I'm assuming no one has signed up to speak. No one online, no one in the audience. You've got the opportunity to rebut if you have anything else you wish to say. Great, thank you. Thank you for coming this evening. With that, we will close the hearing and render a decision. Open the floor for discussion or motion from the commission.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move to approve application DRH 24-00202.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners Owens and Moore. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Maroney,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Otter,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Owens,
Aye.
Aye.
Sales, Moore,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Great, thank you. Next up on our agenda, item number 2, DRH 24-00226 at 1319 North 23rd Street. Could we have the staff report, Richard?
This is the aerial map indicating where the property is located on the southwest corner of Lemp and 23rd Street. Here's the aerial site plan. Photographs of the exterior, the front and the side, street side. And these are the letters of intent for the proposed siding to the left, and the steps is the letter to the right. Here is the design of the proposed steps. The house is currently clad in horizontal siding, which will be repaired as necessary. At the gable ends, there is currently a vertical wood slat siding that appears to be more recent and is being proposed to be removed. Once that siding is removed, it may uncover what the existing historic siding material was and its profile. Per the guidelines, the historic materials need to be identified first, then attempts to retain and preserve the material should be undertaken. If in a preservable state, the material should be protected and maintained and repaired as necessary. If it cannot be retained, maintained, and repaired due to its being missing or severely deteriorated or damaged, the preferred option is to design replacement based on the existing information, such as remnants of the original feature. Ideally, the replacement will be identical in material, color, and design to the original. However, substitutes may be used provided they are congruous to the existing historic features. Since the existing siding may be uncovered and can become the basis for a decision to repair the existing historic siding or replacement of the damaged or unrepairable siding, staff has added conditions to the approval to ensure that the final result is a visual match to what may be uncovered after the siding is removed. In response to the denied application DRH 24-00173 to alter the primary facade by constructing a wide wooden front porch and steps with a motion stating more appropriate choices would be concrete stoop that was shown in the original survey photos. The applicant is proposing to construct a narrow concrete stoop with concrete steps and a simple metal siding. Using the photograph from the Idaho Historic Sites Inventory Form as a basis for the design makes this congruous with the residential guidelines, which on page 30 state, should the porch be missing entirely, research, and this could be considered a porch as it is a stoop, which is kind of like a porch. Should the porch be missing entirely, research should be conducted to perform a restoration that is based on historical, pictorial, or physical documentation. Whether a replacement or an addition, a new design should not create a false historical appearance, but rather be congruous with the historic character of the building. In no case should the new entrance be incongruous in size, scale, material, and colors. And this approach that they have done have taken is in consideration of the commission's motion and the above stated guidelines. With that, based on the above analysis, staff recommends approval, and I will stand for any questions from the commission.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions for staff from the commission? All right, hearing none, is the applicant present? Would you please step forward, state your name and address?
Thank you, Chairperson. Commissioners, Jared Hayes, 1319 North 23rd Street, Boise, Idaho, 83702.
Thank you. Is there anything else that you wish to elaborate on or present to the commission with?
Richard did such an awesome job, I can't.
He does an awesome job,
Anything.
doesn't he? Yes.
No, we're just trying to follow the rules, get this done and get it repaired before winter, at least the siding anyway, follow the recommendations on the concrete instead of the wooden porch. So unless you have any questions for me.
Are there any questions for the applicant from the commission? All right, hearing none. Is there a member of the neighborhood association present?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sandy Herman, 1404 North Summit Street. Mr. Chair, Commissioner and Commission. We are in favor of the more historically accurate stoop in the new proposal, and we agree with staff to approve this project. We recommend the homeowner consider a stone brick permeable patio in the landscape at ground level for neighborhood socializing.
Thank you. Any questions for the neighborhood association from the commission? Great. Thank you. Is there anyone else present wishing to testify on this project? No one in person or online. The applicant, you do have now the ability to come back and have 5 minutes of rebuttal.
I just want to say thank you. The ground floor thing with the seating is what you're actually to do as well for socializing. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right, with that, we will close the public hearing and render a decision. Open the floor for discussion or motion from the commission.
I will open this up since I made the motion last time. I'm really glad you're going with the concrete stoop. I think it'll be aesthetically more pleasing with the neighborhood and more cohesive. And I'm excited that we had a project, I think last month too, that maybe we'll have historic siding underneath. So that's always great if there is historic siding that we retain and preserve it when we can. So with that, I'm going to motion to approve DRH 24-00226 with the staff's recommended conditions of approval.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Owens. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Maroney,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Otter,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Owens,
Aye.
Sales,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all for your attendance this evening. And with that, we are adjourned.